Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Basic Income Tea. Today, we're talking about starting local pilots and initiating UBI schemes, basic income schemes on a local level, be that municipal level, regional level, or any other type of a local basic income scheme. We have some wonderful guests with us today, and I'd like to call on them. We have Jitka Cardova, join us from the Czech Republic. Jitka has founded an NGO that is focusing solely on initiating pilots and advocating for pilots. Jitka, if you can please turn on your camera and your audio so we can see you. Welcome, Jitka.
Hello, everyone.
We also have with us Johnny Douglas, representing here the UBI Lab Network. I believe you're joining from Sheffield today.
I'm indeed. Hi, everyone. Great to be here today.
Great. And finally, last but not least, we have Julio joining us here from Berlin, like I am, and representing BN, for which is working as a social outreach and also coordinating the BIRAL, for which we will talk about in a minute. Welcome, Julio.
Hi. Hello, everybody.
All right. So today, the topic is starting basic income pilots on the local level. And the whole idea is that, especially after this pandemic, we have many mishaps of the existing social security systems, essentially not covering those in need, those most in need, even though they often target them explicitly to make sure that they are covered. One movement that is lately gaining a lot of popularity, apart from the notion of basic income in general becoming more and more popular, there is a movement for establishing basic income schemes on a local level. There is the movement of the mayors for basic income in USA. The UBI Lab Network has started, which John is representing here, has started the Mayoral Pledge. And we have activists like Jitka trying to push for it on a local level. And we have activists trying to bring all the local movements and all the mayors from all over the world into roundtables, which Julio will talk a lot more about. So today we're going to talk about that. And the way this is going to work, like every basic income tea of UBIE works, is for the first half of our, I don't know if I should call it a show or a webinar or whatever. For the first half, we'll have remarks from our wonderful guests. And for the second half, we'll be taking questions from the audience. So be sure, if you're joining us through Zoom, be sure to check out the Q&A tool if you want to ask specific questions that we'll take in the second half to the audience. Be sure to introduce yourself to the chat so we can have a discussion going on while we're introducing the topic. And we'll make sure to take as much input from the audience as possible. Now, without further ado, I'd like Jitka to introduce yourself. So tell us a couple of words about you and what are you doing here?
Okay, thank you first for the invitation. Second thing is that I will have to correct you a little bit because we are actually a local association. That's true. We are based in Czech Republic, but our intention is not actually to kick only for a local pilot for UBI, but what we rather like to do is to kick for it on the European level, exactly because it is pretty tough to ask the government and to plead on the government and on the Czech Republic administration to provide UBI and to focus on this issue. So and I guess like we will be discussing exactly this, why it is so hard to make it on the governmental level. And there's one way, as we know about the municipalities now and the mayors, we will talk about. And there is another way, of course, the hard one as well, to plead the transnational organizations, international organizations, and, for example, European leadership.
Yeah, thank you for correcting me and welcome again. So as we'll see today, it's curious that it's easier or maybe easier to start pilots on either the local or a transnational level, but potentially harder on a national level. We are also using another tool that for interaction with our audience, which is we launch polls, and then we have our panelists basically commenting on the results of those polls. And we're going to launch our first poll now, which is exactly on the topic we introduced. So if you've joined in via Zoom, you should see any second now a pop-up window asking you to give your opinion on a poll. The question on the poll is there a realistic chance for UBI pilots to happen anytime soon? It should be launched now. So let's leave a few minutes for the audience to reply. And we have started receiving replies. Meanwhile, Yitka, can you start analyzing what is the difference between pilots and experiments? I think you wanted to clarify that while we're receiving the answers from the audience.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we have seen a row of experiments happening, and we all know about that happening, that this kind of thing is happening. But what are the experiments? Experiments are termini. The experiments are like short-term things. They are for 1 year or 2 years, or maybe even making changes during this time and being shortened. And experimenting with UBI is only possible on actually poor people, because they have to allow you. You can't experiment with the thing like on rich people and take the money from them and make them poor. So in my eyes, experiments are first very humiliating. And secondly, we don't learn much for what we need to know from experiments, because they're usually depending on how much money we can devote to the experiment, and usually it means only hundreds or sometimes even just tens of people attending and being the subject of such an experiment. And of course, if you have poor people, because these are the subject of the experiments, if you have poor people in troubles, we know, and we don't need to test that money, like a regular benefit of finance, will just make them feel better and provide for their situation. But what we really need to test or to figure out like how it would look is the macro effects of UBI. And in this, we just need to do a proper pilot programs that would be continuous, that would be long-term, or just like really continuous. You know, pilot program should mean something that provides us with information, what's going on, what's the changes, but we don't mean to finish it, actually. If you remember how we were, for example, changing the educational system, we were doing pilot programs because we had a vision. We wanted what we want to achieve. We knew that the old system was wrong. And we knew that we wanted to shift to another system that would be like better for everyone. And for
I'm wondering how likely they are. Let's see what the audience thinks. So you can now see the results of the poll, and we can see that we have many optimistic people in the audience. So what do you think? Can you comment on the results?
Sure. I think actually I feel the same. I feel they are really necessary, and therefore they will be happening very soon. They are necessary. We are on the peak of the growth economy and on the destruction that we already see, and we know that we need the change. And according to this, we just need the basic income pilots coming. We need the experience of some other system, and the experience can be provided by pilot programs that will be large.
All right, so the whole discussion today will be pilots, introduced and with the difference from the experiments by Yitka. And a significant part of starting pilots on a local level is reaching out to people, and no one can be best at that from judging from the results than the UBI Lab network, which Johnny here represents. So Johnny, you want to introduce UBI Lab the UBI Lab network to the audience?
I'd love to. Cheers. So the UBI Lab Network is, I suppose at its heart, an ecosystem of groups of people wanting to take action and campaign for testing a basic income to see how it can help people fundamentally. So one of the things that makes us unique is that everything we do is based on a set of values that enable us to adapt and change and keep moving forwards without necessarily knowing what the exact landscape is. And obviously lots of things are changing at the moment. So rather than advocate specifically for a policy or an amount or get drawn into debating terms, we have 4 values that underpin any basic income that we think should be a reality, which I can put definitions for in the chat in a second. But we believe it should be equal, simple, democratic, and inclusive. And what that means is that hopefully lots of people can work together from slightly different perspectives and keep things moving forward. And we connect everyone together by having a brand, which is the UBI Lab Network, but everybody carves out their own identity within that brand. So each lab gets its own imagery, and that's something that they can take pride in and showcases their place if it's geographically based to others and to the rest of the world. But it also means when they go knocking on doors or contacting an organization or politicians or institutions, they have more weight behind them than just an individual. So hopefully that gives them a lot of benefits of being part of something bigger, but also having the advantages of being something small and nimble and adaptable, because each lab has complete agency over the work that it does, the time it spends, and what it actually chooses to do. And because all the labs are doing lots of different things, everybody contributes to a whole. So no matter how much time or commitment you're able to give, you can see that the little bit that you're putting in is always having an effect to move the cause further. And you can definitely see that your time that you are putting in is worthwhile, because when we're talking about these big, huge kind of unsolvable problems that result in massive policy change, sometimes it can be a bit overbearing and overwhelming. But if you can see that the little bit that you're putting in is actually contributing to move things forward, hopefully that keeps everybody motivated for the months, years that it's going to take us to move things forward. And we have a core team of about 4 people. So myself, Sam, Chiwe, and James, that are based in Sheffield, that support that network, which is 40 labs now across the world. Most of those are based in the UK, but we do have 6 international labs, and then we have 6 sort of thematic non-geographic labs. So as well as people using their place as a way of bringing them together, we also have a women's lab, a youth lab, an arts lab, a disability lab, an LGBTQ+ lab, and a food lab. So again, people can carve out the thing that matters to them about UBI rather than necessarily the macro kind of economics or policy. They go, what would a UBI mean to me? Okay, we're going to work in that area, and we're going to talk to other people that would appeal to, or that enables us to engage with. And by working out that perspective, we can tell stories, and other people can appreciate and understand those stories, and they can see that all the kind of nuances of all the little differences a basic income could make, while still having academics and economists and counsellors and all sorts of different people within the network, so that everybody is reassured that kind of solid core is there. And we basically try to take actions that we then create resources around and share, so that once someone's done it, they can take the resources that are hopefully 70 or 80% ready, and they can change it using their expertise, probably the most valuable sort of expertise, which is lived experience. So they know how to communicate to their neighbor or their street or people in their community, and convince or talk to those people about what matters to them, because there's that synergy. And I think we often undervalue that expertise that is that lived experience, or we kind of put it into a hierarchy that's less than the knowledge of the policy or the knowledge of the economics. And actually, the way we change the world is one person at a time, and that lived experience is the most valuable expertise, because we can turn the other bits of expertise into resources and we can share them more easily. But you can't necessarily share local knowledge, which is why it's so important to build from the grassroots up. And we're always advocating for testing, not just because we need to prove something as the concept of basic income, but we also need it as a way of introducing it to people and showing them how it might make a difference and making it more palatable and easy for them to understand. And we do that through kind of lots of strands of activity, one of which we did recently was a Mayoral Pledge campaign. So we got people standing for mayoral elections across the England to sign up and say that they would advocate for testing a basic income where they are if they got elected. And that transitioned into the Welsh Parliament, and we replicated that. And then working with Basic Income Network Scotland, we translated it into the Scottish Parliament elections, and then we did it actually as a local council elections across the whole of England. So we end up with thousands of people being able to call on their local representatives that were standing for different posts. And because of the way that UK elections worked, all 4 of those races culminated on the 6th of May. So we turned it into this massive day for basic income because in the UK, because lots of people were signing up saying, when I get into power, if you vote for me, I am pledging that I will commit to working cross-party, so it becomes non-partisan, to get basic income tests so we can see what it would do for you in this locality as my contract to you as your elected representative.
Right. So it looks like one of the best recipes to convince people is to show them that their actions have results. And I was seeing Julio constantly giving you a thumbs up. So Julio will come next. But before that, I'd like to launch the second poll for the audience to see if our audience would be willing to join a local initiative, be that a UBI Lab or any other kind of local initiative pushing for UBI on a local level. And we have the poll launched right now. The answers that are available are that the audience is already in one, or second, that they would like to, but they don't have a group to join, or that there is another group that could be aligned to the cause, or not my cup of tea. So let's see what the audience thinks. And maybe, Julio, you can give a quick comment because I'm really intrigued by your constant thumbs up. So I'm wondering what you think about it.
So first of all, thank you, everybody, for organizing this, especially to you, Antonis. And nice to meet you, Johnny and Litka. My name is Julio Linares. I am social outreach for BIEN, the Basic Income Earth Network. And recently we've established Viral, or Viral, which stands for the Basic Income Research and Action Lab. And the whole purpose of Viral is to create a roundtable for local mayors that are either already issuing a basic income to their citizens or would like to connect with each other at an international level. So this is something we've been working on for the last few months. So far, we've done two research seminars connecting first two local currency policies that have been implemented already in the city of Maricá in Brazil and in the region of Gyeonggi in South Korea. So it's also a research network for practitioners and for policymakers to create best tools of how to, in practice, promote and push basic income. And so for the Mayors Roundtable, the purpose there is also to create a space where the mayors themselves can share their experiences about what is it that worked for them, what didn't, questions of narrative, questions of politics, and just get them to ask questions to each other as a way of, we hope, creating a bottom-up municipalist international movement for basic income. And so to say that we don't have to wait for the central government to issue basic income, we can start it at the local level, at a municipal level, and internationally connecting these efforts as a way of creating pressure at the centers. So that's what we've been working on at the moment. And yeah, we welcome all movements in every nation of the world, every territory of the world that is pushing basic income, especially in Europe. I know European nation states can be hard bones to crack, but definitely there is a lot of hope and a lot of things already happening if you look at the grassroots, right? What's happening at the local, here in Germany, the communes or the local municipal levels in different parts. So yeah, it's also a question of politics, of course, and also a legal question about where does the money come from? Who gets to issue it? And also taxation questions that I'm happy if we can get into that later. But in general, yeah, I think this came out of an effort to say, let's stop asking for basic income and let's start doing that. So my work personally looks at the relationship between local currencies or community currencies, money systems, democratic money systems, and basic income as a means of bringing it to people from the bottom up.
Yeah, it looks like we did a good job selecting the speakers today because you're all complementing each other's points and creating a really nice flow. So contrary to what people may think, the main argument for selecting speakers today is not that there's the first name begins with the letter J. So with that joke, I'd like us to to stop the poll and share the results so we can have a quick comment. And I'll read aloud the results. We have 75% of our Zoom attendees that are already attending, working in a local initiative promoting UBI. So it's a very selective bunch. And we have 19% that they would like to, but don't have a group yet. There is a 7% that can think of another group that could join the cause, and nobody is against the idea. So that's good stuff. Any quick comment from Johnny on how you think, like, what is, if you were to mention the one core argument that would convince people to advocate on a local level, what would that be in one sentence?
I mean, for me, there isn't one strapline, and that's why we need the local levels, because you know what matters to people in your community, and you know how to talk to them, and you know what matters to them. And there's lots of different things within a basic income that could be, and you're the expert that gives that input that allows us collectively to work together, join the dots, and make this a reality.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Then that's and it proves like you said, it proves the need to adapt your message to your audience, like you should do in any kind of PR, but especially for basic income. What you all mentioned before is focus on the results. There are results, and we from the inside know it, but I guess this should be made very, very clear to the audience. And with that, that was a good pass for the next poll. Let's launch the third poll, which has to do with whether people believe there is a better chance of UBI starting on a local level as opposed to a national level. And I'd like Julio to start discussing the difference while our audience is voting on whether local or national is more likely to them.
Okay, so let's take the example of the EU, right? Or well, just any nation state within the EU, right? Who controls the monetary supply in any given European nation state that uses the euro? The European Central Bank. If a nation state in a country like Germany, for example, or Greece or any country would like to issue a basic income at a national level, they essentially have to get them from their own national budget. And if they were to actually start issuing, let's say, their own euros, they will be basically breaking the law to some extent. So what I mean by this is that the power today to create money from a nation state perspective inside of the EU, it's really, really centralized, and that creates some issues of resiliencies from a local economic perspective. So euros are not getting to people at a lot of local levels. So by creating local ways in which mayors, governors, local officials in power can create policies, not experiments, not pilots, but real policies at the local level that impact people's lives, and then say, okay, we're gonna issue this here. It's a question then, it then becomes a more flexible question of how to do that. So for example, in Brazil, what happened was that the government there had a bunch of revenues coming in from the industry there. They have a big oil industry there, and a lot of the dividends from the oil were turned into the local currency that was then given to the city of Maricá. In the case of Gyeonggi, it's a bit more complex there. They have different forms of taxations at a regional level. The government also allows for this type of redistribution policies to happen in the form of a local currency, right? So I think it's a lot about also how do you build local power to then grow a movement that can scale to the national level. I'm thinking this in a more organic way. So if we were to create a municipalist movement for basic income, whereby local mayors can decide, okay, I'm gonna issue this to my citizens, and then I can scale that up to the mayor next door. It's an easier way of sort of surrounding the center, so to say, to then say, okay, now it's your turn to say we want this. And there are already many mayors who are doing this. The mayor of South Korea, who issued this basic income, he's now running for president next year, and he has high chances of being elected. And so I think it's a matter of political perspective and seizing the energy of the moment. You see emerging mayors for basic income movements happening now in the US, also in Korea, in Brazil, in the UK, and many other places in the world. So it's just a matter of connecting the dots and really pushing for local policies to increase everywhere. I think that's that would be a much more efficient and resilient way of fixing a lot of the problems that we have today.
Yeah, I saw both Yitka and Johnny giving you another thumbs up there. And we're receiving some very interesting comments on the chat from our audience. We'll read some of them in a minute, but first let's see what the audience think about whether there are better chances starting a UBI on a local level rather than on a national level. You can see the results if you've joined via Zoom. I will read them out loud for those watching the live stream. So the question is, do you believe starting UBI on a local level has more chances than on a national level? And the audience is a bit split here. We have 39% saying definitely, the odds for starting local are better. We have 31% saying maybe, because at least they can reach the mayor. We have 8% advocating for the national having more control, so more chances. And we have 24% saying that none of the two actually has chances. So this is this is controversial as a result. Who would like? No, Yitka, let's comment on that.
No, I don't
hear your
think
voice.
It's controversial because none of the two means that we have the third option I mentioned, like a transnational or international level, which wasn't mentioned in the poll. So therefore, and I guess, yeah, it's alike. I mean, local level has definitely its benefits and its ways, but also like its, let's say, its aims, because it's done from different angle. And for different reasons, mainly, I guess, like socially and like the regenerative issue. But on the international level, you are trying to change the systemic thing as we work like actually globally. And now I speak again about the growth economy. We have to turn into some other kind of economy or economies, maybe. So I guess like if it depends much on what we expect the UBI to do mainly or first. So then like we target the international level or the local levels. But I don't see it then controversial. I think it's very much complementary.
Yep, I would agree. And the question was shaped more or less as a trick question.
Maybe.
if you're forced to choose between two predefined options, maybe Johnny can share a similar example from another poll. But yeah, when you're forced to choose between two options, it's creating this false equivalent that the two options are opposing one another on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's ignoring any third kind of option or any options outside of the spectrum of what you're asking the audience. So that's the trick there. Maybe Johnny, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because all of these things are inextricably linked, and the real question is, where does the power reside? Like, who has the power to do what at what level? And this is why it's so important to do all of the levels. So another one of the projects that we've done is we've got councils, local councils that are representative of bits of the UK to pass motions calling on central government. So it's taken the local elected representatives and calling on Westminster, who has the power, because that's where the Treasury is, that's where the Department, DWP is, that's where HMRC is for all the tax and the welfare state. But they're showing local representation that's representative of a large group of people calling on the central, obviously at a national level where the power resides, going, we want you to give us permission to do this. And it sets up that dynamic of people going, well, hang on a minute, why aren't we doing this? And I think that's what we need to do, is we need to build that kind of head of steam and that pressure of lots of people on all the different levels calling for this, so that when we get to things like the pandemic, as horrible as it's been, and obviously none of us would have wished for it, the pandemic has moved the conversation about basic income on maybe like 5, 6, 7 years in the last 18 months, because people are going, well, hang on a minute, this is what we're faced with. What are we going to do? And politicians don't have any answers. And it's kind of our job to push so that there's this answer there, that when they don't have anything to grab, they go, well, we're just going to have to give it a go because we haven't got anything to suggest.
Yeah, we see that there are structural issues, systemic issues that are, at least there is a silver lining of the pandemic that is revealing more of those, as sad as some of the outcomes may be. I think that's a good pass for our last poll, which I'd like to launch now, which is, you were commenting on who has the power. Let's get back to the whole point of mayors. Do they actually have a power? Can people speak to them? Do they want to speak to them? And we have another poll coming up now, which is asking something very simple. Would you in the audience, talk to your mayor about basic income? Let's see what the audience answers to that. And then for that, I would like to hear from everyone. But maybe Julio, you can start commenting on that from the point of view of interacting now on a more frequent basis with mayors that have already started some pilots on a local level, but you're bringing them global together. So I'd like to hear some concrete points from that experience.
I think that's a really good question. So I think the question of who has the power, it's of course right now in basically on the parliamentary levels, right? Like it depends on the political system. One thing you see when you're trying to push something like a municipal basic income movement is that every political system in every nation state is very different. And so when you're putting them together, in some countries, people will tell you mayors have no power here. It's all about the president or the prime minister. And in some other countries, they will tell you, actually, this is a great idea. We have a decentralized municipal structure whereby the bottom has a lot of the power, and then the center, it's kind of equal, right? So it's really a question of which country you're looking at, and then as Johnny was saying, like figuring out how to target that place there, right? Yeah, I think in general though, if I may also talk about a bit about the structural issues at play here, is that we see that our current political institutions, also regardless of the country, are failing. I mean, I come from Guatemala, where there are basically less than 2% of the population has been vaccinated now because of COVID, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And in places also like the UK or in European nations, there is so many structural issues at play that are not dealt with. And for me, what's interesting from a more political and economic approach in connecting mayors is to think about how can we bring about just an alternative, not just a monetary fabric or a monetary structure, but also a different political system that allows people to have the power also to issue money. So I think for me, and ideally more than mayors, it should be people, the ones that have the power to issue their own basic income into being. And like and just to go beyond this big this too big to fail type of systems that we have today, either not to say that we don't need them, of course we need them at the moment, but we also need to build other forms, other social forms, because the ones we have today are not really coming up to the challenges of our times.
Yeah, I think the main thing to remember there is that, like we commented on the previous question, the different systems and different approaches can and should be complementary rather than appearing as competitive, right? With that, let's see the results of the poll and let's comment on those. So we have, and the results are being shared on the screen for those that have answered now. We have 42% of our audience here saying that they've already talked to their mayor about basic income. That's the majority. Then we have 30% as a second most popular answer, saying that they love the idea, so they are willing to approach a mayor. 18% saying that mayors are unreachable where they are, and 12% saying that they're a bit hesitant, but they'll think about it. So I'd like to hear some comments on that. Let's hear from Johnny.
Yeah, I agree with what was just said. Really, in the UK, mayors are kind of don't really have any power, and one of the things that we've done is we've assembled a group that's the first of its kind in the country called a CPPLG, which is basically a thing that exists that normally only MPs, i.e. the people at Westminster, sit on. But we've created the second L is for local representation. So we've tried to bring together in a room to focus on talking about UBI, local councillors, mayors, MPs in England, but also the devolved administrations in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland, so that they're all talking to each other and about different things. So again, you've got different people that are representative of very sort of local wards, of regions, and the kind of full MP level that's normally put into a hierarchy. And we've just flattened it, going, you all have these problems, don't you? Because people are struggling and you're representative and elected by those people. Let's focus your attention and resource you with the confidence and ability to speak about this, so that when you are put on a spot, you've got this thing in your pocket in which you can start to look intelligent and different to other people, because you have got something that you're not saying will work, you're saying we need to try it out. And for me, that's where the piloting and the testing bit comes in. It's not about proving the concept of basic income. It's looking at, well, how much would affect people in my local area in this way, and let's test that, and let's test other things that may also be comparable, and let's compare them, because our objectives is to help and support people, and this looks plausible, but we need to work out how and what it will do for different people.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we've reached halfway through, a bit over actually, so I'd like to hear your comments on some of what the audience is writing already. So I think the last one is a good pass for Gitka. It says that what we need most is to have pilot projects on a transnational level instead of having national level as a hurdle rather than as a way to get there. So you want to comment on how to do it on a European level, for example, since you've already established an organization for that?
This is really a comment that is for me. Yes, our idea, or why we actually made the association and what we are targeting to is to make European Union understand that we need UBI, and to try it in the way of kind of like transnational regional pilot project, which means we would just like pick up one region. Sorry, afterwards. I hope European Union is calling actually to make the pilot. So the idea is not to use like as little finance as possible. It means we actually need one region to understand the macro effects, and so European Union could just like target one region, like big enough, and devote the money for that. And let's say like all the countries, each of those could be part of the process of understanding like what's going on and how to actually copy such a project to their conditions on the local levels. And we just need one pilot for the whole European Union that all the countries could participate on. And that's not that much money and that much effort. and we can just develop the strategies how to make that. So that's actually the idea, to make it on the transnational level, because that's we all can benefit from, and it would have the item of the cooperation finally, like the solidarity and the cooperation, when the countries could cooperate on analyzing, on like really focusing on what's happening in this region, then we can the more quick the changes can come, that we can just apply the same thing regionally elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, what's the point of having a transnational structures like the European Union if there's the national level works as a hurdle, right?
Exactly.
There are many questions that always come up when discussing about basic income. One of the most common ones is how on earth do you fund one? So I'm going to combine a few comments that I'm reading plus a question about funding. There is a comment saying that there are ecological and economic reasons to start with a local currency or a complementary currency on a local level. And there are also a couple of different questions that I'm receiving from the audience about how exactly to finance a local basic income, be that from an alternative currency or from a fiat currency. And that, I think, is going straight to Julio.
Great. I think on the ecological issue, before I dwell on the finance thing, it's a very interesting question, because if you have a local currency as a basic income, what you're doing is that you're also regionalizing existing supply chains. So what happens in Brazil is a good example, is that businesses start to exchange with each other and also with their suppliers and different supply chains. And then maybe the stuff that they would have gotten from somewhere else, they start to get it inside. So there's also local production that starts to happen as well, right? So there is this regionalizing, rejuvenalizing aspect to a local currency as a basic income that is especially needed in a place like Europe. Here in Berlin, where I live, the farmers around the corner in Brandenburg cannot afford to produce food, mainly because they cannot compete against export-led products from just south of Spain. So with a basic income, a farmer can actually spend time in farming and also provide products that are more competitive and also more locally grounded, and people here can access them as well. Now, on the topic of finance, I would ask also the same question: is how do you fund a basic income at a national level? It's the same principle. Like the principles of monetary creation and monetary destruction are not rocket science. Any political community has the power to issue its own currency and also take it away. This taking away, we call it taxation. A local mayor can issue money. This has happened in history for many parts of the world. Can issue money into being and then tax it away. The question is about the law, the legal aspects of it, because while there are many local currencies out there, they are, in the world, in Europe especially, they are not given as a basic income. And so there is a legal framework whereby they can exist, but there is also a need for a political push so that locally these currencies that are issued as a basic income can be accepted by the central governments, right? So it depends also on the level of government that you're speaking about. So for example, in Germany, the entity of government which is legally supposed to provide welfare is the federal government, whereas the smaller governments are just more for other aspects, right? So I think it's a little bit about this conversation of who gets to give welfare to whom and why. Why do people in Frankfurt or Belgium decide about welfare in Greece and Albania and so on, right? These are the questions that you tackle when you're talking about a local basic income movement. It's like, how can we create more sustainability for our own people where we are? And then it also allows for people to have sustainability in other places where they are, as opposed to waiting for the center to give the rule.
Yeah. But yeah, you said about one region deciding about another one, how that can be an issue. Of course, can be an issue on a global level, but Yitka, for European Union, I think there are some structures that could be complementary to the local levels. What would you say to that?
I didn't get now the question.
Because I probably didn't ask it very clear.
Sorry.
I'm thinking aloud, essentially, that what I'm saying is that in the European Union, we do have structures that allow members from one local or regional or national level to have an input on somebody else's, but not exactly directly. So maybe you can give a comment on how to utilize the European level in favor of basic income rather than seeing it as another obstacle on the way, which was a comment that we received as well.
And there is one comment about that as well. Of course, like now the European Union has the structures, they are more or less like full of blocks to that, but I guess like we don't have really that much energy and time to be trying to hack the system of European Union, which is what we are trying to do, like with going local, doing it like other ways and so on. But there is, of course, like one like necessary way we have to try to, and it is to change the system. And to my opinion, it is okay, European Union should be the democratic leadership that is standing for something, like at least theoretically or in the idea. So I guess like we have to communicate that loudly, like to give arguments, to have an open dialogue about like how it should actually be, what it should mean, and what it should provide to the whole continent, actually, in my view. And we have to change that. But the first is like the first step is to target it with the arguments, with the reflection of like what the leadership actually should be. Of course, the comment was to the neoliberal democracy and the stuff like that. We know it. You know, it's like we know that. So we have to talk about that. I mean, everyone knows it's as well, like again, like connected to this growth economy, we have this problem, and we don't have much time to go around. We just have to discuss this, and we have to like to use the policies to get them changed. I mean, we have to change the system, and there is no going around. So yeah, I'm all in favor to doing it also locally, because it gives us the power from the bottom, at least like in the ways we can do it now. But of course, like we have to do it directly too. We have to discuss our administration on the European level.
Yep. So from the transnational, let's go back to the local. A nice comment just arrived about the mayors for basic income in USA. It gives some numbers that 52 mayors and more, they are actually more now, have already launched or committed to launch a guaranteed income pilots. Johnny, how do we convince, what's the best way to convince a mayor to sign the pledge and say, yes, I'm going to try it out?
So I suppose whether it's approaching a mayor or a councillor or as we do in the UK, kind of MPs, members of parliament, it's all about kind of finding ways to ask those questions multiple times or introduce that idea. Back to the whole sort of one-line strapline killer argument thing. That's not how people's minds are changed. Like they need to be familiar with something before they can be persuaded by it. If you just come up with something new and different that's too different to what they're used to, or has terminology that's kind of that they're not used and comfortable saying, they need the time to engage with it. They need the time to learn about it, because they're speaking in front of other people. They don't want to say the wrong thing or kind of look stupid or kind of say worse than that. That's kind of almost like a controversial thing. So I think it's about finding lots of little ways to introduce it. And obviously there's a kind of that rule of thumb that is kind of 7 points of contact to form a relationship with someone. And then you start to persuade them, and you never quite know what the tipping point is for them. There's not one thing that they go, oh, I get it now. It's they become introduced to it, they become familiar with it. And I think that's why that engagement at all those different levels, at the top strategically across kind of the whole of Europe and all the way down. We need to be layering up those things so that they're moving forward, because within that, there is people that don't hold the power in the traditional institutional hierarchical sense, but there is the general public. And every single time they're exposed to it, they become more familiar with it. And I think that's what we've seen in getting local councils to pass motions. One of the biggest things for us on that is to then get local press about that, because it doesn't matter whether you've seen an acronym from afar or something's been discussed at a national level. As soon as the place you live is also included in the news story that talks about this thing, that's when you sit up and pay attention and you go, oh, could it be happening here? Is there a pilot? What does that mean? And then they're engaged with the conversation of who pays for it? What is it? Is it a cost? Is it an investment? What difference would it make to me and my community, rather than just another piece of politics that always seems far away? So I think it's just about finding lots of little ways of engaging with whatever elected representative it is or someone that holds power. Don't try and convince them in one go. And also with the network, in the way that it's distributed and we're always talking to each other, even if one person fails, they learn something about what the pushback was, and they can share that with others. So when they therefore approach someone that's maybe from a similar political party or exists in a similar place that needs persuading in that way, they can contribute to persuading the next person. Even though they're not necessarily won the battle they were going for, they can keep contributing because we've learned something new about why that person wasn't persuaded or didn't engage.
Yeah, there's no silver pill. You have to take a step-by-step process and keep persisting. We have a kind of a positive comment on the chat saying that if you do reach out and arrange a meeting and reach out in general to your local representatives and you persist, it often brings results. And we have another question that I think I'm going to pass to Julio because it's like it's a good follow-up, I think, from the previous point. Is how do you change more generalized conceptions from the public that consider basic income like a black hole for money, that is just you're just putting stuff in and doesn't really come out? And how do you avoid such generalizations when you do already have some pilots, and you can of course just say, hey, just do another one, that easily prove the power of basic income? So how do you avoid generalizations of basic income as a way to lose money rather than investing in?
Wait, so the question is, how do you avoid generalizations about basic
From the
income
public
being,
opinion, yeah.
What exactly? I didn't catch this last part.
Like a black hole for money.
Okay.
Like you put the money and then it's only one way.
I see. Well, I think that's the thing. I think it's by I think it's a process of, I don't know if there's an English word for this, but like alienization, like the opposite of alienation, like when you become unalienated. So like you actually start to figure out that this money that you spent went into a baker, and that baker spent it in the flour and the milk and the butter and the local farmer, and people start to see and understand what an economy is, what people are taking care of to make their life. And I think that's one big issue. Just by doing basic income, you can show them examples like the ones we mentioned today, for example, in Brazil or in South Korea, is that people, one thing that happened in South Korea, right, opposite to a lot of the assumptions, is that people were actually wanting to be more reciprocal with each other. So this idea of unconditionality actually meant a lot of reciprocity in practice. And when people got this basic income unconditionally, they were like, okay, great, now I want to give back as well. So it's also the social relations that are also changing. But I think it's a matter of, as you were saying, it's a lived experience that we have to do. That's why I'm pushing for people to expand as many policies that we can locally, so that more and more people can see that basic income is already a reality and it's changing people's lives, and that it can also change the way we relate to each other. Basic income is a way of challenging the relationships that we have to each other and to the world. And I think it's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah, so if you have doubts, just start a pilot, see the results in practice, right? We have 5 minutes left. I'd like to ask 2 questions, one to Yitka and one to Johnny, based on the comments that I'm receiving. Yika, do you want to have like a brief comment on unconditionality? I think you have a good point there that it would be nice to share here.
I'm not sure which point you mean, but on unconditionality. Well,
Give
one
one.
point I would love to, yeah, I can just plant it, but one exactly I would love to make is that unconditionality, I love the concept because it shows that the troubles we have now in this actual system are so hard for poor people as well as for the rich people, that we are in one loop actually, and that like making basic income, unconditional basic income happen would lose both the types of the people, as we are now divided artificially to riches and to the poors. It would just lose all of us and set us free, because right now, like the rich guys have to follow the imperative of this growth economy and, like, you know, make make their profits like bigger and bigger and be the biggest fishes and whatever. And they don't do that just because we are such people. They do it like easily understood. They do it because they just don't want to happen to be poor people, because being poor is today just even worse than being rich, I would say. But none of these options is good for us. And so that's about the unconditionality maybe of basic income right now.
Yeah, it's like we're fetishizing one aspect while punishing another, even though you could argue there's no
this is
no
one loop
involved in one. Yeah. There's
They're
another
all...
comment here that there's a huge amount of money spent in administering and testing the eligibility. So that is much more of a black hole, to answer the previous commenter, than actually implementing a basic income, right? Johnny, there is another question on the Q&A that I'm going to try to summarize, but I think you have a close relation to art as well, right? So just to shift the waters a bit, I want you to just quickly comment on how would basic income on a local level promote art or empower art in any way?
So we have an arts lab. So one of the non-geographic thematic labs is an arts lab, and that's a really diverse cross-section of all sorts of different disciplines and interests in art, music, and all sorts of things like that. So one of the things that we try to balance is, obviously, with there being a lot of artists in there, we try not to ask them to do the thing that they do to make money, to do it for free, but we've had lots of contributions where kind of it's not necessarily their paid discipline, but they also are interested in. One of the really interesting projects that we've done in and around that is by the co-founder of the Arts Lab, Toby, who's also part of the Northeast Lab and founded that. And I think that speaks to some of the stuff that you were saying about the kind of black hole and the misconceptions. He's got an amazing project where he engages people talking about basic income without mentioning basic income. He talks to them about, if someone paid all of your bills for a year, what would you do with that year? And it gets people thinking in a different way about the value of having that time and what's important to them. And another one of the projects he's done that's is part of the same thing, where he gets people to kind of go into the kind of studio space and write this up, is the question of, what did you imagine you would be when you grew up, when you were a kid? and it's that thinking ahead of all this necessity to kind of do work, which is somehow held in such high regard, but it's not doing work. It's about basically kind of profiteering and exploitation so that other people can take money out of the system. You're not doing work because you're kind of choosing to a lot of the time, or kind of because you're the opposite end, being lazy. I mean, in the UK, we've just had this furlough support scheme where people were given 80% of their wages, but they were specifically told they couldn't work on their jobs. And rather than going, hurrah, I can sit on the sofa and just kind of watch some sort of streaming service all the time, people were going out of their minds going, give me something to do, meaningful, because I derive more than my paycheck from my work. And I think there's lots of that kind of, if you gave people a basic income, they'll all just become poets. Well, no, they won't, but it will give them the freedom to choose and incorporate that bit of themselves that maybe has more of an artistic persuasion into work that's more meaningful. And we've got a number of other kind of art projects coming up that if people want to engage with or join the Arts Lab, they'd be very welcome to.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for this. Alan Watts asked this famous question, like it was in the 70s or 80s or something. What would you do if money was no object? That has the assumption that money is indeed no object. Like there are practicalities there, and artists have been forced to do so much without that is out of their power. This webinar is like a few seconds towards its end, so I'd like to give 1 minute for your one sentence final remark to each of you, and also remind our attendees that after we stop the streaming, you're joining through Zoom, you can stay for another few minutes to just have an informal discussion that is not streamed. And now your final comments. Julio, let's start with you.
Thank you so much. I have to leave because I have another meeting now, but I want to say that if they're really serious about strengthening the commons and building alternatives outside of the current structures of today, we really have to democratize money. We have to stop thinking of money as an object. We have to think about it as a social relation and democratize it and give it to each other unconditionally so we can live a plentiful life. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you very much, Julio. Johnny,
Bye-bye.
Let's continue with you.
I would just say thank you so much for the invite today, and thank you for everyone joining us. And I would say let's all just keep working together because no one has the solution. Like I come from a product design background, so the thing I'm always fascinated by is how we get from where we are now to where we want to be. Like if we could just implement the thing, it'd be easy and everybody would be happy. The tricky bit is transitioning from where we are to where we want to be. And none of us know what that path is. And the only way we work it out is by doing it. And we work it out along the way. We have to set off and we have to work it out along the way. So there's a load of uncertainty. There's a load of kind of dealing with ambiguity. But as hard as that feels, that's literally how we get this done.
Yeah, and that's the whole point about pilots, right? Jitka, your comment.
Okay, thank you too. And what I would love to say is let's not underestimate the open communication. The structures are maybe dividing us now, but we're not really divided. And when you speak like face to face, openly about the issues and about the real consequences and like really make your arguments sound plausible and true, then it can work. So let's not like just say, okay, the official structures will never understand. I don't believe that. And I have been convinced many times that the real communication, personal communication can do a lot.
Yep, wonderful words to end on. Jitka, Johnny, Julio, thank you very, very much for being our guests today. And to the audience, thank you very much for attending. We are organizing Basic Income Tea webinars relatively frequently. If you have a proposal for one, just send us one. Get in touch with us, find out more about the initiatives of our speakers, and start local.